Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Brian, for asking and deliver on for kind of reaching out and doing this. So, quick show of hands, I guess. Who's put on a HoloLens? Who's worn one? Okay, so pretty much everybody here is like, shut up, Dan. I just want to put the thing on. Stop talking to me about code. Who cares? What is this thing really like? I think back to April, or actually, let's say it was February. We found out we were going to be in wave one of this. I was sitting there, trying to get people at Kiewit hyped up about it. This was before anybody had really put them on, and everybody was like, "You're crazy. This is not a thing. It's going to be, a crappy little laptop that you wear." And over the course of the last 5 months, it's come so far, and you've seen Microsoft take it even further. They're now able to produce the hardware at a rate where anybody can go out and buy it. I think you can buy up to 5 now on one account from the Windows Store. So it is a growing technology. It is something to invest in, and I can tell you after using it for as long as we have, it may not be the future like 6 months from now, but 2, 3, 4 years, you're going to see a lot of holographic, augmented reality type applications that are not just games. There is definitely a use case in the business. So that's where we come in, right? How do you build something? How do you bring in data to these apps? How do you do what we do today using MVC, SQL Server, web services? How do you do that with this? So we'll touch on that a little bit. I promise this slideshow is super short. I think it's like 8 slides, and then we're going to jump straight into Unity and Visual Studio and get things going with the real interesting stuff. But there are some really important things to hit on here. Is anybody like crossing their fingers? Your company's going to buy a HoloLens tomorrow, or is everybody just kind of like, not yet? Has anybody got one on order? Nothing? No? Okay. Well, I'll talk a little bit about building a team like we have, which is important if anybody ever gets to the point where they are going to do that. These are the past history. I swear we'll just be in code, and I'll have the HoloLens on, do some demos and some things like that. So first of all, augmented reality versus virtual reality. When you walk into a group that has no idea what the difference is, it's really important to point out HoloLens is an augmented reality device. It is not virtual reality. It can do virtual reality concepts, but most virtual reality devices are tethered, meaning that it's not doing the processing. It's hooked up to a Surface or some high-powered machine on the back end doing all the work, and you're sitting down. Augmented reality, and specifically with HoloLens, it's completely untethered. This is everything. It's got a battery, PC, lasts about 4 hours. And the point is that you go out into your space and you use the application. You're not taken somewhere by the application like Minecraft on the left there. You have no idea where that person is. He could be sitting in his bathtub. Who knows? Whereas this guy, this is augmented reality. You can see he's got stuff placed on his sofa, on his table, on the floor. That's the key difference. So when you build holographic applications using augmented reality, you really want to figure out how can I use the user's space without really knowing what their space is to enhance their experience. Augmented reality is really adding digital content to someone's world and making it seem physical is the best way I can describe it.
The good example will be recent Pokemon Go.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's when we went to Denver on Tuesday and we demoed this to a few people who had never seen it before. That's exactly the use case we used. As you all know what Pokemon Go is, that's augmented reality. So again, I'm Dan Nash. This is my holographic skill set, I guess, and it kind of lays out what you need to have to build a holographic application. As you can see, it's really bare. Holographic apps are way more 3D than you probably realize. There's a ton of stuff that goes on before it even hits Unity that needs to be good. Otherwise, you're going to be staring at a bunch of white boxes and spheres, and you're not going to have a real rich experience. Luckily, at Kiewit, sitting here in the front row, we had a former 3D professional, I would say, and I've got kind of the top set of skills nailed down, sort of. We're both a little light on Unity. He's got the bottom stuff, I mean, to a T. He's great with animation, 3D, whatever, he can get it done. So we kind of hammer out our POCs together and work in tandem. But as far as building a team,
on a typical .NET app, MVC, you may have developers that do full stack development, everything back end to front end, they're doing it all. Some teams have guys where you're sliced horizontal and you're just doing UI, you're just doing back end. Holographic teams, I would say, is going to be more you got people focusing in areas. So these are your 3D guys, these are your .NET guys. You may even have Unity guys that are separate from .NET. So there's a need for everything, and it's probably not a one-person team like you can do in a typical MVC app. That's not to scare anybody away. That's just to kind of give you the lay of the land. When we went to build and we were part of their holographic academy, I had no idea what I was walking into, and I had no idea that most of the stuff was 3D. You have nothing unless you have some good 3D content to work with. So just a quick timeline of Kiewit and how we got where we are. Last fall, we kind of started to see all the hype videos coming out that there's a developer kit out there. 2 different groups within Kiewit reached out to Microsoft to get a couple devices, and long story short, we ended up in Wave 1, which shipped in April. We got back from build and our HoloLenses were there basically. And then since then, we've really gone through a few phases. We didn't know what the heck we were doing, so we were playing with what I equate to the Microsoft Word and Paint with HoloLens and taking that around and getting people excited. And then we started to actually get into the code and how do we build this? How do we build something that Kiewit could actually use is what we've kind of shifted into. And now that we have a handful of POCs, we're in kind of a show and tell mode where we take it out to different partners that Kiewit has or internal partners, and we show them and get excitement and trying to get some real products behind it. So I mentioned AR is not going away, and it's not really a fad. Has anybody heard of Magic Leap yet? Yeah, so Google wrote an $800 million check to a startup called Magic Leap, and they are an augmented reality startup out of Florida. It's rumored that that's coming out the end of this year. Apple stole a bunch of HoloLens developers from Microsoft, and Microsoft is, obviously they're the first to the market with one of these that's untethered. They've also, a really important note that I'm excited about is they've opened up the hardware to other vendors. Microsoft's not they're not great at hardware. It's pretty good, but you'll start seeing Windows holographic running on Dells, Nokias, who knows what. So this is the equivalent of I remember when my dad used to come home and he was carrying a briefcase that was his car phone. That's what this is right now. So it's going to get better, it's going to get lighter, it's going to get more powerful over time. So I thought this was really interesting. And, if anybody pays attention to emerging technologies, I thought the titles at the bottom are worth this slide anyways. So HoloLens is in the trough of disillusionment right now, which is kind of funny. But you can see this is kind of a timeline of what's coming out over the next 10 years. Sorry for the pixelation there. But augmented reality sits right here, and here's virtual reality. So what that means is they're a couple of years from really taking off and people and being more mainstream is what they're predicting. All right, so I promised a short slideshow. I don't think that was too bad. What we're going to do now is I'll jump into Unity. We'll start an app. We'll see how long it goes. Kind of gauge you guys. If you want me to keep messing around in code, I can take some feedback. We can try some stuff. Or you can tell me to shut up and we'll start wearing these things, whatever you want to do. So, without further ado, let's do this. I'm gonna... you can use, is it DirectX? Am I using the right term there? I haven't, if you follow the HoloLens community, you don't see anybody doing that. Most of it's in Unity, but you don't have to. The SDK, if you will, for HoloLens is it works with Unity. I don't think it works with DirectX.
If you want to do your own map, you can use DirectX.
Yeah. It's raw. You can probably do a lot more, but it's not for your novice. So we're going to work with BB-8 here. Harsha spent, I think, all day yesterday modeling this thing out, and it looks awesome. So I figured we better use it in today's demonstration. I'm going to start from scratch. I do have some backup scripts, so don't consider me a failure if I'm uncommenting code on you. So this is the Unity editor. Anybody familiar with Unity? Used it before? First time you've ever seen it? A couple guys out there used it before. When I got the HoloLens, I had this thing on before I ever even opened this. So it's not bad. It's pretty easy to get used to, get a hang of, and there's a ton of documentation out there on it. But basically, everything starts with a scene. I mean, what you're doing here is you're building a game. Essentially, that's the mindset you have to have. Frame rate is extremely important on the HoloLens, meaning when I pull up a script here in a second, you'll see a function called update that runs every time it draws, and it needs to run 60 times a second. So if you're calling a web service and the update function, it better be asynchronous. In other words, otherwise your app just freezes, hangs, and does nothing. So it all starts with your holograms. So let's find BB-8 here. You can see here he is down here. So we're going to take this guy and we'll play with him, and he's got a couple different tricks that he does. We've got some sound. I'm not sure quite how that'll work here, but hopefully you guys will be able to hear it. So he's going to be the focal point of our app. So what we'll do is we'll just drag him right out here. And over here on the right, you've got what they call the inspector pane. So I put BB-8 out on the scene. Let's see if we can find him. You get lost in their world sometimes. All right, there he is. So everything works off of a game object. It's hard to draw lines between this and like an ASP.NET application, but this is almost like it's an entity or a web page. If you want to make the web page do something, you need to add something to his scripting over here. You need to attach events to him. You need to let him respond to things. But first things first, Unity is it's not just for HoloLens. This is a version of Unity that they've published for HoloLens, but it's for more than HoloLens. So they've kind of, Microsoft with their Holo Toolkit has canned some menu options here that we can just change the scene settings, project settings. And essentially what that does is, while it restarts, reloads the project, there's a camera in every scene. And when you're playing a video game or you're watching like a Frozen or some movie that Disney's produced, there's cameras all over the place, and they can switch angles and switch views all the time. Well, in a holographic application, this is your camera. So it starts on your head. If you take your camera in Unity and you throw it at 0 plus, I don't know, 5 meters or something like that, your camera is now going to be clear over here, and your user is going to be like, what the heck is going on, because everything's disoriented. So some of those settings, all they're doing is fixing the camera, fixing the scene to get it right. So I briefly mentioned the Holo Toolkit as well. That is your .NET SDK, if you will, or your HoloLens SDK for holographic applications. And Microsoft, I can't say enough about how often they contribute to it, and everything that they've put out there from day one to now. It's come so far, and they're constantly contributing. It's out on GitHub. You can see their commit list. They have several of their developers just dedicated to answering questions, improving, taking pull requests, merging stuff in. It's a really cool thing they're doing with it. So I just threw our main camera back out there. You can see over here its position is 0, 0, 0, meaning that when the app starts on the HoloLens, it should think it's right at center, if you will. BB-8 is kind of off. Let's see where he's at. He's at 002, it looks like. So let's, thing about holograms, if you put him at 000 and your camera's at 000, does anybody know where he'll be? I'll be inside of him. Yeah. So you'll put it on and you'll be like, what's wrong? It's broken. No, you need to take 3 steps back and he's standing in front of you is what it is. So typically, it's all meter based. You usually want to bring them down just to start, like a meter or half a meter. We'll try that and see what this ends up looking like. And then you want to maybe position them out from you, let's say another half meter. So we've got BB-8 kind of placed somewhere where we might be able to see him. He looks a little low to me. But let's, Unity's got kind of a preview mode here. Yeah, he's off the radar. Let's move him up a little bit. I think he's there. He's very small. So we'll change his scale a little bit, make him a little bit bigger. He's right on top of the camera there. So. Still not there. Well, the easiest thing to do when you have this issue is to deploy it and see where he's at.
You click on the camera and
Yeah,
you can see that. Yeah. So now spin it around.
Yeah.
Just stick it in my folder.
Can you access it?
No, not the camera.
Yeah, he's not in front of me enough.
Can you access projection views in Unity, like like in the modeling software you can?
Yeah, by clicking.
There we go.
those Blue arrows and then
Oh.
you go to top view.
All right, so now he's going to be out in front of us a little bit. Looks like he's actually facing the wrong way, so we'll go ahead and rotate him a little bit too. All right, and he's kind of looking at us. All right. So if we want to actually do something with a BB-8, there's a few main ways we can interact with them: gesture, gaze, and voice. GGV is the acronym they use. Gesture is when you've got the HoloLens on, you can reach your hand out in front of him, and whatever you're looking at, you'll see a little cursor. And if you do this pinch gesture, I'm sure you've seen in the videos, you can trigger an on-click event, if you will, to that, and we'll make him animate here in a second when we do that. Voice, you can subscribe to keywords. Cortana's enabled on this, so we can instruct him to do things, and voice is another way to get an event in there. And then also gaze, think of that like mouse over, if you will. So if I hover over him or touch him with my gaze, I can make him say hi or whatever. So to do those things, we got to add a couple more things to our scene here. So all we really have right now is a light, which you don't really need in HoloLens always, our model, our BB-8, and our camera. So to enable all those other things I was talking about, what you have to do is come back to your Holo Toolkit here, come to our prefabs, and we'll just use the basic cursor. This is going to add a cursor to your screen. So think of that like adding a mouse to your web app is basically what I just did. That'll allow me to let the user know where he's pointing his head at, or where the HoloLens thinks he's pointing his head at anyway. And then we'll also add some spatial mapping. This is probably the coolest feature of HoloLens. It knows about your environment. It's constantly mapping it with its Kinect camera, which is very cool. to work with. So we've got spatial mapping. Let's do our gestures as well. So the other prefabs we need are put okay. So they release all these gaze manager, gesture manager, and essentially what they are is ways for you to easily bring those events into your scene. So gesture manager, what that's going to do is it's automatically going to start watching for my hand pulling up, and I can subscribe to events, hand recognized, things like that. You don't have to add them to your scene. I mentioned the 60 frame rate per second. The more you add, the more it's doing, the slower it can get. So you don't want to go just add everything in the kitchen sink to it. Your HoloLens app will get a little laggy. So you got to kind of pick and choose what you put in. But for the most part, the Microsoft stuff is really good. We've tried some 3D, some Unity asset stuff off of their store, and it's hit and miss because, again, most of it's for gaming and they have a little bit more power usually. All right, so let's give this a try here. We'll do the voice first. So we'll also add the keyword manager. To give you an idea of how awesome the toolkit is, if we want to add the ability to respond to hello, for example, we can type in hello as our keyword, and we can choose down here when I add a couple more scripts, we're going to be able to just choose from a list of functions that are in our scene. So I'll do that quick. We've also got to BB8, I will add our BB8 manager. And to look at this stuff, if I double click on these scripts, it's going to open Visual Studio. And here we'll finally get into code that we've actually written for this. All right, so quick just structure of the class. You guys can't see that very well? A little better? All right, we'll look at it this way then. So what we have is, here's the update function I mentioned. This runs every time the frame runs, so that's running all the time. You got to be really careful. Start, that runs when when in this case the game object is activated on the scene, and then you've got a couple more that are canned with Unity that I don't have in here. There's a few other main functions, but the one we're going to be concerned about for the keyword manager I was just referring to is this do action. There's a couple quirky things with the Unity version of C# or .NET. It's not your full .NET. If you notice here, I've got a case statement and some strings, which you typically don't want to be doing that, but with the way the Holo Toolkit works, you have to pass simple types into here. So that's just one kind of area where you're not dealing with apples to apples when you compare it to a web app. So let's see if this picked it up. Jump back to our managers here, come over to keyword, to none. So we're going to tell it to look at, actually we want to tell it to look at BB8. So down here I should see BB manager, should see do action. So what were my two actions? I've got a walk and a talk action right now. That at the end of the day we're going to try and get the animator to play a little animation that BB8 has. So we'll do the talk one first. Jumping back over to BB8, you notice over here my BB manager also takes a few parameters. it's taken in an audio source and 2 audio clips, a walk clip and a talk clip. Those are really pretty dirt simple to expose. Just got public members that look like that. And you've got a source. Now, what an audio source is, HoloLens is not only mapping your environment in 3D, but it's also got 3D sound associated with it. So if I throw an audio source 10 meters out in front of me and I start playing music from it, it's going to sound like a speaker is sitting 10 meters out in front of me. And if I turn around, it's going to sound like it's behind me. So what we want to do here is our game objects can move around. So what you need to do if you really want a true effect, let's say BB-8 is going to walk around and talk to us, you have to attach the audio source to BB-8, and that way it'll follow him around. So we'll do that. Make sure 3D is enabled. Okay, and then we'll jump back over to set our audio source, and then we've got a couple of audio clips we canned. All right. So now that when the application starts up, it's going to fill in those members of the BB-8 manager class that I had. So next thing, let's make it easy just to make sure all that's hooked up. And all we'll do is on update, if it's been 3 seconds, we will just have him do something. And the best way to test to see if this works is actually through Unity, because the HoloLens deployment process or debugging process, if you will, it's a 3-step process. It can be a little bit cumbersome. In an hour, you might spend, if you're doing a lot of back and forth and trying to put the HoloLens on, you might spend 15 or 20 minutes just sitting there waiting for it to deploy to the HoloLens, put it on in your head, wait for it to come up. So you really have to take advantage of the tools like Unity and also the emulator to be able to speed up your development. Which also means that you don't have to have a HoloLens to start doing development on it. You can do development without HoloLens at all. The emulator is fantastic, and there's one thing I did not add, which is the animator. So let me jump back over here. So every object, when we brought BB-8 in, it detected that he had some animation settings on him, so it added this animator for us. The way that, I'll get into this here in a little bit, but the way that the Unity animation engine works is you have this animation controller that, in games you typically can watch something walk and then jump, and it's kind of all in a sequence, and it's kind of like a workflow for animation, if you will. So now that that's set, let's try that again. There he goes. Now he's doing all sorts of stuff. So the one thing I didn't like about BB-8, and Harsher, you may have to help me out here, but he's got that galaxy floating above him. So what I want to show you here quick is kind of being able to hide and show things. I'm assuming that's part of his head group. Eye. Solar system. So, if you want to hide an element in HTML, for example, you can do that. If I want to get rid of this guy and make him not active, check that button and he shouldn't show up anymore. Yep. Now it's just BB-8. So, it's kind of lame without any sound there. So let's get that hooked up. So I mentioned the audio source. We have that attached here, and I have my 2 audio clips. The only thing we have to do now is go through the code, and whenever this do action function runs, which we're triggering right now just to keep it simple, after 3 seconds of the update function running. So in other words, at 3 seconds after the app runs, what we need to do now is go enable all the audio clips. So quick reference on this code. Basically, the switch statement's just to set my animator animation clip that I want to play. We pass the animator, the thing I just put that controller on, this guy, a string that the animation was titled. And in this case, it's walk and talk, I believe. And then it'll play it. These parameters essentially just reset that animation workflow back to 0. Otherwise, what happens is if you have walk and then talk, or talk and then walk, you play talk and then you have to play walk next. You can't play them back to back. So this resets it back to its original state. The audio source, again, I pull up the source, give it a clip, hit play, and it should go. Now, I don't actually think that the Unity editor will show us the sound, so we might have to try this through the HoloLens. Stand corrected. Okay, so let's do it through the HoloLens anyway. And while I get this set up, if anybody has any questions, this is a good time for that, because this does take about a minute or so for it to get going.
So when you're developing a model for your environment, is it or you have to use the built-in editor that's here? I assume there is a built-in editor, or you can bring in Blender or 3D Max or Maya models.
You have to. Really, the Unity is just a game development package, so there's not a lot of modeling tools. Actually, there's no modeling tools. There's just some simple primitive spheres and boxes and things. So everything, the textures, the models, the animation, most of the time was spent on the animation. That was all in Autodesk Maya. So any other 3D package, it doesn't matter. You can use Blender, you can use 3ds Max, whatever. Export it into an FBX, and then Unity can read that and import it.
Yep. As far as creating the 3D model, you create anything that Unity will accept. We've had really good luck with OBJs, FBXs, Harsha's partial to Maya, so that's pretty much what we've been using, but it doesn't matter. As long as you can get it out into a format Unity will accept. So the build process, it's a little bit convoluted. It's something I'm sure they're working on. But essentially, you hit build settings, you come over here, you want to build a universal app. This is any UWP app will run on here. So that means that you can take your 2D apps, if you've built those, pull them up on here, you can deploy them to the HoloLens, and it'll work fine. Now, that doesn't mean that your 2D app responds well to gaze and to scrolling with someone's hand. You got to make sure, just like when you go mobile, you have to make sure things are a certain size so that your fingers can touch it and that sort of thing. But it will run. It'll work fine. It runs Office pretty well, actually. We're building a 3D app. We're going to deploy it to our local machine. Just a couple other quick notes. There's a lot of, I guess, I would call them capabilities is what they're called, but they're kind of like features of HoloLens that you want to come in here and enable. So I mentioned that I keep talking about that frame rate per second. The more the HoloLens is doing, the less processing power it has. So if your app doesn't care about spatial perception at all and you just want to show 3D models out in space, you may want to turn that off. You can turn on and off Bluetooth, microphone, internet. It's got the ability to share hologram positioning and things like that across the network if you want to. But for right now, we've got the spatial perception and the microphone turned on so that it can hear us. Without that, if I sat there and spoke to it, it would do nothing. So without further ado, you guys saw me add my open scene there. We'll hit build, and with any luck, it will actually build fine. It is got like 60 gigs of hard drive space, and I don't actually know off the top of my head memory and CPU. We can.
It has that, remember right, and some for custom CPU. Remember 2 gig RAM plus 1 gig for GPU. It's their special.
So basically what Unity just did there is build me a UWP solution in the folder I selected. So we'll open that up, and this is how you actually deploy to the HoloLens. You can see why I personally, if I'm doing development on this for half a day or a day or something, I'll use the emulator for most of the development. When I think it's ready, I'll throw the HoloLens on and make sure everything looks good. But it's just too long of a process to deploy to all the time, at least right now. So the kind of the structure of our app, if you're used to building UWP apps, this file here should look pretty familiar. You can set all your UWP settings. It's set to run on target device, a Windows holographic. You can set that to, I think it's Windows.Universal as well, and it'll work fine. But if you're deploying to the Microsoft Store, for example, doing that will limit it to just showing up in their HoloLens section. So to deploy to it, there's a couple ways you can do it. I've got it set up right now where I'm actually I've got the USB connected. You can deploy over Wi-Fi as well. You can debug, and it works okay, but HoloLens apps are really terrible in debug mode. They are very slow, and they don't work great. So I find myself debugging out of release mode actually sometimes, and it works okay. If I really have a problem and I'm really stuck, I'll throw it in debug mode and deal with the poor performance. And my HoloLens shut off, so this should fail. Unless I can get it turned on quick. It's a race. It worked. All right, so what it's asking for me right now is this is a laptop here, a Surface that I don't use all the time. So similar to when you develop on a phone, you have to allow it to connect to your device. So it just wants me to put in a code. All right. The other thing I want to do is, this is zero fun with you guys sitting there looking at, which one do I have on? Sitting there looking at me enjoying the holograms. So yeah, that's my 3-year-old. She loves this thing. It's my Magic glasses. So we will actually show you guys what I'm seeing here. If anybody's, I'm sure you guys have all seen the videos that have been put out there about HoloLens. This is not how they're capturing those. They have a... Sorry, that was distracting to me at least. They have an awesome camera that is essentially a camera wearing a HoloLens. This here is it's kind of a poor man's way to do the demo, but without it, it's really hard to explain what I'm seeing or what the person's seeing with the HoloLens on. Those white triangles you guys see, that's actually what the HoloLens knows about the space. So you can see it's mapped chairs, it's mapped the floor. If you got here early, you saw me kind of walking around. It's mapped the ceiling a little bit. The more I'm in this space, the more it's going to know, the more it's going to remember. BB-8's already done its thing, so let's see if those walk and talk gestures are working. Except I don't remember what I keyed them on, so let's go check that out. What was it? Hello. Hello. Can you guys hear that? Probably not. Okay, so that's just an example of the keywords there. So every time I say hello, hello, come on, Cortana.
I'm sorry, the internet and I aren't talking right now.
That's actually Cortana. That wasn't our app. Hello. that actually reminds me that when you do keyword recognition, they actually recommend you don't use words like hello because the trigger is hello Cortana. So that's a bad user experience on our part, and you guys are all at fault because you were here too.
When you're doing the trigger words and all that, do you have to have a internet connection or not?
No, Cortana's running on here. So I'll jump back over.
Sure, I can show you, but first I need to quit the current experience.
Quiet, Cortana.
Is that okay?
So if Cortana needs to go look something up online, obviously she needs.
I can show you, but first I need to quit the current
Thank you. Obviously, she needs access to the internet to do that. But within our apps, if you're just using,
I can show you, but first I need to quit the
if you're just using your own keywords, it doesn't matter because like in our case, it's doing nothing other than calling a function that we wrote. So that's no big deal. As far as keywords go, we got one more to add. So we had one for, that's wrong. We had one for walk, but if you remember, we also have or one for talk. We also have a walk animation that we'll show here. Walk, how about that? See how creative we can get. We can save that. Remind me when I put it back on. We'll do that as well. But so that was a kind of a hello world. There was a hologram floating out in space. I couldn't really do anything other than talk to it. Again, if you remember back when I was first talking 5 minutes ago when I was talking, you want to be able to use the user's space. So we haven't really done that yet. So there's a really awesome script in the Holo Toolkit that allows you to grab a hologram and put it somewhere, called tap to place. So what this will allow me to do is look at BB-8, and if I have everything set up right as far as the gaze and gesture manager, I'll be able to grab him like this, put him down here if I want to on the floor or on this chair here, and then let him go, and then he'll sit there. So we'll give that a try. The one annoying thing I had is I actually hate those white triangles, so I'm going to turn those off, which is in spatial mapping. Draw visual meshes. You can get really crazy with the visual meshes depending on your use case. Thinking about Kiwit as an example, if we wanted to actually know what's rounded, where the HVAC lines are, where the wires are, we would want to up the settings here and really have it get detailed with its model that it's building. It's essentially, as it looks around, it's building a 3D model of your space. By default, it's pretty bland, and if you have it on, you can kind of see that the table kind of ends right here, and it's not exactly perfect. But you can mess with that a little bit.
Does it react on the space change? So let's say somebody moved a chair, will it detect that it's moved and trigger it?
Yeah, sure will. So I modified the scene, so I have to save the scene and go through that 3-step process again.
Hey, before you build it, you want to rotate him 180. I noticed he was on. He's gonna go diagonally.
Sure.
Yeah, he's at 143. And why? Just rotate him 180.
Where do you want it? 180?
Yeah.
See, he tells me how things should look, and I do the functionality.
Because I know the walk is 90 degrees, so he's gonna go right into that wall.
Are you worried he's gonna go outside? Suicide
How the lens and the full lens is going to map this window is going to detect
Not very well. It has issues with Windows, natural light coming in. Right now, it probably wouldn't. Same with photography. There's like a golden hour right at dusk when you get perfect lighting. The same with the HoloLens. You can actually go outside and project in daylight, but any other times it's not great.
Does it hold maps of other rooms?
It does.
Yep.
So it can cache everything that we're hidden.
Yep, through it,
So-
through
so
the SDK, you
projecting,
can,
like, the transparency on that wall after you've done a map of the other side, you can see the other side. So long as it didn't change, obviously.
Yes. So I heard you right, yeah.
yeah,
He's got his.
ask that again.
Okay, so if you map this room, you go in there, you do a 360 in there, and then come back out and transport like.
Yes, it will
maybe
know,
you can
yeah,
transparency
absolutely.
window in
Yeah.
there.
If I shut it down, leave, and come back a week later, as long as I didn't delete this space from its hard drive, it'll know right where it is.
And you can export that out to a model, to an actual 3D model, and put that in. So if you want to go to another setting early ahead of time.
What did I do?
You can do that.
Does it map people too?
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed it was mapping us when we were doing it.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's-
But how accurate is it?
Well, it's as accurate as.
Oh.
as you said.
Well, here, while this comes up, I mean, you guys can't see that.
It changed with me.
It took a few seconds lag.
Right.
I think that was mostly for the.
That's
go to
another
the
thing, yeah,
video.
that latency was in here.
So again, the triangles here, I don't know how well you guys can see it up there, but you can see that it doesn't quite have that chair perfect.
But you don't have it set to.
I have it set at its defaults.
Right.
So it knows Harsha's sitting right there. If he moves around, obviously it's going to be a little bit off, but it'll pick him back up. It's not real time, but it's,
But what it's doing though is perfect for the HoloLens because it's getting broad surfaces like that, right?
Mhm.
For the button. I mean, for a table, that's why it doesn't care about what's under it. You're most likely not going to be attaching holograms to the bottom anyway.
all right, here's another glitch. So if you plug the device in after opening Visual Studio, which the HoloLens went to sleep on me, you have to start it all over.
I was watching a demo where they were taking like the Pacific Rim robots, like kaiju robots,
Mhm.
having them fight in the office, and it's like, but it's to destroy the furniture. I'm like, no, but I'm pretty sure you can do the wall thing. That's right, yeah, cool.
Especially if you had a camera in the other room to feed the video to it.
Yeah.
Then you could actually see somebody in the other room.
That resolution from the projector. So where-
I don't know, is the resolution
Yeah,
bad?
we can't even see it.
That'll map it.
Let's see it.
Well-
Everything in Unity so.
It must be the projector. I mean, on HDMI.
Having a 3D camera or not.
Beyond a certain distance, it doesn't
Or
matter.
you might be able to change
I know.
the
I'm
resolution.
not gonna mess with it.
But you're dealing with large.
Yeah. 3D camera would be better.
So it's a regular camera.
Well, you have to think about it in the perspective of you're trying to see through an opaque wall. You're putting something on the other side of the wall in your place that's giving you a live feed of what's going on in that room. So if you've got a 3D camera, then you can actually like map objects and then give perspective to the secondary device that's doing a bunch of math to figure out what it should be able to see at that second.
So I'll flip over to the screen here. It's about to deploy. There's a lot of different ways, user experiences the apps that are out there have. You can see here when that catches up. It starts with this Made with Unity, and since we really have it doing nothing right now, it just shows BB-8, and there he is kind of running around. A lot of times what applications will do is they'll start with a splash screen that tells you to get to a part of the room that's open, and then they'll put another screen that's up that says, okay, now walk around. I need to find walls and floors and things like that, so it has more control over the space.
You trying to squish my head?
I am trying to squish your head. So tap to place isn't working, but let's try the other one. Walk. Have the volume down. Walk. Did it really? Still good. Okay, so let's jump back. We'll take a look at our tap displays. Missing something there.
BB-8 was completely opaque there. Can you make him translucent?
Yeah. You can- yeah, through the shade.
He wasn't to me. So there is a difference slightly when we use this mixed reality capture tool that we're using to show it from what I see and what you guys see. From what we've experienced, this is way better than what you see up there. It's much more stable. It's I didn't notice him being opaque at all. I couldn't see through it to see him at all. I was just looking at BB-8. So if it looked opaque, it wasn't in here. That was a mixed reality capture thing. So I'm gonna cheat quick in front of you guys.
Everything looks different through that. The lighting, there's actual real light in that scene. It's completely.
Oh yeah. Gaze and gesture. Missing. Gesture, gaze. Should work. We'll come back to tap the place after I try and debug it again, but it should be working. All right, so I talked about animation a little bit, and I'm going to dive into that a little bit more here. So I talked about the workflow, and that's kind of what we're looking at here. I have 2 of them out there right now. If I can zoom out. There we go. So we've got BB-8 or BB Talk and BB Walk. BB-8 has a still listening. He's got a couple other animations that we can throw at this guy. So if we wanted to add another animation. Got walk, talk, and map rotate. And a key thing here is I mentioned it's a workflow. For our purposes, we have it completely disconnected. This is kind of your entry point. We have a new state, which is basically just nothing. So it shouldn't be doing anything when it first loads up, except for the script that we told it to start the walk after 3 seconds. But now we have 3 different animations that we can control with him. So we'll jump back over here to BB-8. And now our animator shows that it's got 3 clips. And managers, we can add one more keyword here. Call it map. And now we have another animation that we can control. So we've got gaze in place, we've got voice in place. The thing that's not working right now is gesture. So that's when I reach out and interact with him using my fingers. So let's give that another try and see if that works. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll actually apply physics to BB-8. And what that'll do is if we apply physics to him and we have physics on the floor, he should drop, hit the floor, and kind of fall over dead because we haven't really taught BB-8 how to stand up. with physics because it's literally just a sphere rolling around. So let's see if we can get the tap to place working first, and then we'll jump back to that.
Now we can throw them out the window.
How far of a distance does it map?
I think it can go. We can jump to the main camera and see here. By default, 1,000 units. It's going to try and render stuff out 1,000 units. Whether or not it maps that far, I'm not sure. That's kind of up to the Kinect camera.
Unity is what?
It's usually meters in Unity, but that seems like, yeah, that seems like a little far to me.
Yeah, that's, the clipping planes are, I don't
Yeah.
think the clipping planes are doing it.
But
But it did most of the auditorium, like instantly, so it's gotta go more than that.
yep.
How big of the coverage, I mean, how much you can alter of the real space with the virtual? Like, I don't know, put something on the walls
We did our,
and all
we
that.
did our old houses, right?
Is it slowing
4,000
down
square
too
feet.
much, or?
No, no. It's really only paying attention to where it's at right now. So when I'm in my living room and I've got my kitchen mapped, it's not trying to figure out the kitchen because it's not there.
But
Is that what you're asking?
No, so let's say
How
you're,
much can it store throughout all of these rooms?
know how much you can put virtual stuff into, so let's say you're in the kitchen, but you completely alter and it's to like a cave or whatever, will it slow down really bad?
Oh, I see what you're
or-
saying.
Reskinning.
That will
Yeah.
depend on the quality of the models you're putting in, poly count, the textures. If you're using very low light objects, I think you can do several rooms, however much you want. But that's all dependent on how much you throw in the scene and if you work efficiently or not.
Okay.
So what do you guys use this for then? Like, what is your actual purpose for this?
Can we show our stuff? Or?
Yeah. While this builds, I'll show you a couple of our POCs that we're kind of taking around and showing people. Unplug to do that.
We're really in kind of more R&D for this right now. We don't have projects or districts, attached to it yet.
Yeah, like I was telling Matt, it's not like the reason we got this was not that we had the people building the cancer center come to us and said we got to have augmented reality tomorrow, make it happen. It was, and none of you guys are going to find that in your businesses either, I would assume, unless you're working for a gaming company. We're trying to show where there is value. So it's total R&D, small, low budget type stuff. So this is the product we kind of take on the road here.
You may have to restart.
So like I mentioned at first, we focus on people that already have models out there. A lot of our business does this already. So this one was kind of from a group that does proposals and sales. This is a project we're bidding on. And we're just kind of trying to show here that content doesn't always have to be in PowerPoint. It can be shown in real space, and you can use the space around you to show it to a customer. I think that this screen is going to be in the way there. It is. Let's see if I step over here. If you guys noticed that, the projector was actually in the way of me clicking on that. Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Next. And we've also found that trying to teach someone how to use a HoloLens when we demo it to them and teach them the gestures is really difficult. So you saw me messing a lot with keywords there. That's intentional because that's the easiest way for a user to actually utilize the HoloLens. Teaching someone, first of all, when you put it on in a group like this, for example, you feel super awkward if you haven't ever done it before. And then for me to sit there and say, okay, now do this funky bloom gesture like this and this air tap, they're like, whatever, dude, you're nuts. So it's, again, another model. We kind of threw this in quick for the group. They just wanted to see if they could, if their stuff could be used in 3D space. You know, the really cool thing is I can literally get on here and look right down the rail yard there. I can get underneath it if I want to, walk all the way around it. So it's really, you're untethered. You can go anywhere. Next.
So for something like that, can you use your 3D CAD programs as your source?
Yeah,
Yep.
any package you can put it in. That was in Rhino, they created that. This was just in Maya. That last bridge model though was about 4.5 million polygons. So that's extremely high. They say for an optimum scene it's about 500,000 per million.
Yep. So we focus on we call it low effort, high value. So what we're trying to depict here is showing something in 4D. You know, we do a lot of this time lapse type stuff. Customers have questions all the time. Well, where are you going to be in 6 months? Where are you going to be in 12 months? How are you going to handle this in the spring, the winter, whatever? So we don't have it on here, but our vision here is a slider that says 2017, 2018. That sort of thing. It's just it's an animation that's just in a loop right now, but that's the vision there. Next. So this loading scene is actually very intentional. It's not doing anything on the back end other than letting HoloLens kind of flush its memory from the last scene, especially that bridge, the railroad tracks I had out there. It's 4.5 million polygons, which there's probably not to a .NET developer, that meant nothing to me, and I'm sure a lot of you are sitting there saying the same thing, but that's a large model for the HoloLens to render. Microsoft recommends around 200,000. So this again is another thing that a group sent us and said, hey, can you show this? And next.
That's photogrammetry from a drone overhead. So we put LiDAR map images and models in there.
So this is probably our most interactive proof of concept we've built. It's just a project of ours. The map is, I was super surprised at how easy it was to get in here. We set out looking for a Unity plugin that was going to bring a map in, and we could give it, geo coordinates and lat long, and that's how we were going to display it. And Harsha was like, no, why don't we just go take a screenshot of Google Maps and throw it on a plane and see what it looks like. And it looks great. It probably doesn't look much better than it would if we used one of the Unity plugins, except for that we don't have like a terrain here. You don't see hills and things like that. So this is another good example of some gaze, gesture, voice interactions. You can see as I stare at these things, if I tap on them, the concept here is we're showing collision points for these cranes on this job site, and also showing some data that it's fake data right now, but there's no reason we couldn't pull it from a back end given the time of pick history that these pieces of equipment have done during the day. So a couple other cool things that you can do for the user. If you want to, again, this is what BB-8 wasn't doing for me. But if I want to take this and place it over here, now I've got it on the floor here, and we can have some fun here. And
Your phone is holding up great.
is it, or is it lagging bad?
No.
Okay, good.
For a phone.
We can zoom in, and now I kind of feel like I'm inside of it, or at a 1/100th scale or so. And I can really get down inside of it and see how things are going, see some more data.
And this is really, you could work efficiently though, go really low poly count and use more textures and get the detail that way.
Would automatically render from, so like from the high views it'll go lower pixel count up to.
You could do that. You can do LOD script, low detail, and as you get closer to it, you shut that off. I know when that want to build it. Yeah, I mean, the more depends what you're trying to get across. If you don't need high detail, then keep it as low as possible so that you can add a lot more features and make things more interactive.
So here's this happened to me earlier today too, actually, when we were showing this. If you guys see the zoom map button, it shouldn't work because it's actually behind the wall.
Seeding process.
Is it that far behind?
Now it just started slowing.
Okay.
But now it crashed.
We did not buy the $500,000 camera to do demos. But the map button is behind the wall there, so it should not let me click on it because it's literally sitting behind that wall. We got stuck earlier like this, so the way to get unstuck is to, well, in this one we can go back, but we're out.
You can, but we didn't put that in that scene.
Yeah.
Well, no, we did.
So that's probably about half of what we're doing. We kind of catered that little 5-scene look up there to a group we were specifically targeting for the stuff they had thought were good use cases for HoloLens. But that's kind of an actual business application rather than just BB-8 running around. What sort of questions do you guys have?
So how many developers do you have working on that? How long does it
You're looking at them.
You're looking at them. there's two of us.
Hours of midnight.
I'm learning as much as I can about 3D, but I try to stay the heck out of it and let that. And he's learning as much as he can about Unity, but he tries to stay out of it. And it's a moonlight project for us. You know, we do it because we see the value in HoloLens and augmented reality. We've got a small team at Kiewit. We're the technical folks on the team, and then there's people that have contacts all over the place that can help us get these meetings, like I was referring to the one in Denver earlier. So it's small, and I had it up there. I didn't talk about it, but if you are going to build a holographic team or an augmented reality team, you need to kind of keep it small and keep what I call the naysayers out, because like I said, when we realized we were going to get one of these, there were a lot of people at Kiewit that were like, okay, that's a waste of $6,000. Why are we doing that? And you don't want those people on your team. You know, it's cutting edge technology. It's brand new. You can't take it outside and show ROI right away. But you know, if you want to be on the cutting edge, you definitely have to be looking into stuff like this.
How much time do you have into it?
We've had some newborn babies in between. Mess things up.
I would say 100 hours. And I was telling him last night, I kind of got this BB-8 demo working last night, and it took me about 6 hours to get it working. If you look at I have the code. I have the code out there. If you look at my GitHub commits, I'll be embarrassed by it. But if I went back and did it now, it would take me 30 minutes. So most of our time is spent, you know, banging our heads on the keyboards. Why doesn't this work? It's, you know, we're just not used to Unity 100%, not used to this app. And there's not like you can go out and, oh, here's the documented MSDN article about the best practices to do this. They have great forums. And like I said, they've got dedicated resources to answering questions, but it's a slow way to learn if you're constantly on a forum saying, "Hey, how do I do this?" So.
And the BB-8 and my texture modeling animation, everything took about, I don't know, 4 hours, something like that.
So now BB-8 is getting frisky over there.
Yep.
All right, there we go. There's tap to place working.
I'd place him over there if he's gonna
I need to untether. So we'll stick him. Where'd he go? Come on. We'll stick him right here. Wish we had rotate on, but we're kind of looking at his backside here. Walk. Walk.
Do you have other keywords?
Talk. What were my keywords?
I think maybe just a BB-8 walk.
BB-8 walk.
It's like go for a walk.
Go for a walk. Yeah.
That means you're back.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa. Hi, BB-8. Yeah. So there he's working here, and I can walk all the way through him, walk around him. And he's sitting there. If I come over here, I can still see him, and that is because we don't have the occlusion set so that I shouldn't be able to see him when I walk over here. Same thing you saw with the model we were showing, and the zoom button was over there. We're just not respecting the walls in our app right now. All right.
So what kind of thing did you do for your daughter?
HoloLens has, I can show it to you really quick. I don't want to take too much time away from you guys actually demoing this. But it's got these holograms that you can place everywhere. This is what I was talking about, the Microsoft Paint, Microsoft Word of HoloLens. So you can imagine a 3-year-old seeing this, sitting in her living room and getting all excited.
Yeah,
I-
I
I'll-
thought about it. But I did the BB-8 because my daughter loves her, so I'm going to show her that tomorrow.
So that's the type of stuff we did. I couldn't bring myself to do Queen Elsa.
So is the ballerina three-dimensional there? Can you walk around?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. And there's lots of awesome apps like that that we can show when we get into demo. If you guys don't want to see the BB-8 stuff, there's tons of cool apps out there that we have installed on here that we can show. The last thing I was going to show was applying some physics. If you guys want to do that, or we can kind of tell me to shut up and you guys want to try these on. I know not a lot of you had. You guys tell me. Okay, physics it is. So I think the physics stuff is super cool. Because when I first started the talk out, I said you're taking digital objects and placing it in someone's physical world and making them feel real. You can't do that unless when it's running around, it shouldn't have been able to go through that wall. It should have bounced off the wall and come back. And that's what physics does for you. Now, admittedly, we at Kiewit don't have a lot of use case for video games. But we have played with this a little bit, so hopefully we can get it to work. So rigid body is the concept that you have to, or the entity that you have to add to it. In a rigid body, you can turn gravity on or off. When I first opened the app, if I have gravity on, the very first time I opened it, he was kind of floating up here over this empty chair. With gravity on, he's going to fall to the floor, and hopefully I can get him to bounce off the chair and do something like that. But the other piece to that is the spatial mapping needs to also have physics applied to it. So again, the Holo Toolkit has come so far. When I first started this, and if you ever go out and do some of the tutorials, which I highly recommend, you're manually writing this code. See if I can remember what it's called. Spatial Mapping Collider. So this looks like a really complicated, fancy script, but basically all it's doing is I've got a spatial mapping component tied into this scene, and as it's learning about the space, that script is subscribing to an event and says, put a rigid body on it, put a rigid body on it, put a rigid body on it. That's all it's doing. So otherwise, like I said, you're not respecting the walls, you're not doing that sort of thing. So that should be all we have to do. Let's give this a try.
How does the emulator play in when you're talking about environmental related stuff,
It's got a.
Good question.
They have a simulated. You can choose different environments in there, but there's kind of pre-made fake rooms that you've got. Yeah, you can change those with an emulator.
So speaking of physical properties of the, let's say, world around you, material around you or
Yeah.
hard it?
Yeah.
Like,
So,
could it shatter? Could it bend? Could it?
So I don't know. It's not great at doing that with your dynamic environment, but you can, within Unity, give certain types of physics to certain elements that you bring into the world. It doesn't know that this is softer than the floor.
Yeah.
It does know that this is a table, and I can programmatically say, give me a list of tables. I want to put 10 holograms out there, or give me the ceilings, give me the walls, give me the floors. But it doesn't know the density of them,
Yes,
for example.
but could I say that, let's say this object is very, like the sand, it will just sink in it, and or this floor is going to shatter, it will drop something.
That would be really cool.
You
could
can, yeah, you could set those properties.
Make-
For virtual objects, not real ones, right?
For virtual, yes, but again, remember when it's observing the space, and you can tie your own rigid bodies to that. I've never tried it or seen anybody try it, but I don't see why you couldn't, when you programmatically tie that, say this is bouncy, for my lack of knowledge of what that would actually be called in a rigid body.
Minecraft was that they had the table and it just fell in. So it was like quicksand.
Yeah. So what that actually is they have. That's really just a hologram. That's a trick to the eye.
Right, right.
It's still sitting on the table. Your hologram just is 3D and looks like it's going through the table. Deploying over Wi-Fi is a little bit faster, but not through my phone.
This is what you meant. Kind of like you got the other wall. Right. So the
Think he's gonna drop BB-8 on you.
the video game that they demonstrated.
What's that?
You have both these tethered to your phone.
My Surface and the
Yeah.
yeah, they're both tethered to my phone. The network here wouldn't let two devices talk to each other.
That's what I do.
Yeah, it's a champ.
I didn't have any other solutions, so it's either that or you guys were gonna have to trust me that I was looking at BB-8.
Just believe it.
I'm sure you could make it do that.
Their development experience from a debugging standpoint is rather flaky at best. And you saw there that it said it couldn't find the attached device at the local host IP. So not sure what it was trying to do.
It's still in beta, isn't it?
Yeah, the HoloLens Unity. I don't think you can even pay for it, to be honest. It's a special version of Unity 5.4-HTTP HoloLens technical preview. This version of Unity is like megabytes, where the full version is gigabytes. We made the mistake of downloading and waiting half a day for the full version to install once, when we can't even do anything with it.
Was it more than the 45 or so Visual Studio 15 was with the same call?
No. Okay, now we're cooking. All right, so BB-8 should fall down. Yep, he went. He actually fell straight through the floor. He's gone. And honestly, what happened?
It didn't map the phone.
Yeah, what happened there? I mentioned that a lot of apps kind of start with a splash screen, and then they ask you to walk around and map the floor. It hadn't mapped the floor before he fell, so it fell straight through the floor. Is what happened.
You can see them in the lobby.
We can see him in the lobby.
Somebody could get him.
Now you can get around that in your apps. You can persist your state, if you will. As you guys, I mean, you saw me coding this. We didn't do any of that. And then when the user pulls it back up, it's going to know about the space around it. we can try that again. Maybe I'll look a little higher and see if.
Or you could put it face, just to stand in a plane with collisions on it underneath them too.
There he goes again. He's gone. So physics are fun to play with, but you have to think about it when you build your app, because you can't have that happening because he's somewhere, he's gone. You could do something like reset and he could come back up to where he started from. You could code all that up pretty quick, but I won't bore you guys with that. It's already been about an hour and a half. So questions? More you want to see? You want to try more stuff?
You get a lot of firmware updates on the.
There's been 3, and they've changed quite a bit actually. They removed some features. There was a really cool mode called kiosk mode that for us would have been fantastic if we realized it, because like I was saying, it's really hard for somebody to throw it on and just start going and realize the value. Kiosk mode kind of lets you control their experience, but they removed it from the developer edition, and when they came out with the when they released it to the world, and you didn't have to be in one of the early adopter programs, they removed that from this edition and kept it on the other one. So in other words, they want us to spend another $3,000 to get it back. At least that's the speculation out there. People aren't happy about it. What's that?
How do you think they pay for those extra tabs?
Yeah.
You used to only be able to open one app at a time too. I think now you can have up to 3 concurrent apps.
Yeah, the apps can kind of go into background mode, so they're running in the background. If you noticed, when I opened BB-8 back up, he was gone already, and then I closed him and brought him over here and opened back up. That's because it was kind of running in background mode. It hadn't closed out yet. The Holo Toolkit. If I've still got internet here, if my phone's still cooking over there. This thing has contributed to at a pretty amazing rate, and they're constantly. You can't see it? Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the resolution there, guys. It's a GitHub page. You guys have seen it before, but it's contributed to all the time. They run their forums, relate to it, and they've had the same. You can't see his name, but this Niraj guy. He does a lot of the development. He was at Build at the Holographic Academy and doing some of the teaching. So they have Microsoft's got a heavy investment in this. In other words.
Questions?
Could do augmented reality with any other device, like let's say phone.
Yep. You mean with the app I just built?
Using, let's say, Unity, but not using HoloLens. Just
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
almost, if you go to your build setting, you can see there's lots of different things.
Yep. And there's Google Tango. I actually don't know what their development environment is, but it's augmented reality, and you use your phone to do what I was doing on my head. You know, I could hold this out here, and there's BB-8, but I'm kind of moving my phone around, so my field of view is really small. I mentioned Magic Leap. That's another one coming out. I think they officially announced that the development environment for Magic Leap is Unity. So,
Unity and Unreal Engine.
yeah, we're crossing our fingers that the stuff we've built, if we get our hands on one of those devices, it's just going to work.
There's several other headsets too. The Daiquiri and there's some other ones also.
Yep.
wasn't it what Google was trying to accomplish with its glass, or it was
Yeah, the significant difference there is Google Glass is more of a heads-up display. It's not putting things in your space. It doesn't know anything about your space.
That's more.
Yeah. But Google's shifted gears towards that Magic Leap company I was talking about. Interesting thing about Magic Leap, if you look at a HoloLens, you can clearly see there's like 3 pieces of glass about halfway through the visor here, and that's what's actually projecting the holograms. The rumor is on Magic Leap is they've actually reversed that and think about a projector shining in your eye, and that's how they're rendering the light. So in doing that, the field of view on this, when you put it on, it's, I don't know, about like this. I can't see my peripheral. If they got that figured out, they should be able to shine light from any direction. And that would really knock the hardware of HoloLens out if they were able to do that.
Do you have any 3D questions or?
So we wanna, maybe wrap it up and, do some.
Yeah, we can do some demos.
We're doing some giveaways, no, maybe we'll do those, so that way anybody that, doesn't have time to stick around or, might even want to, but, that way we can, progress. Sound good?
Sounds great. And if you guys are interested, I'll probably send the GitHub location to that BB-8 stuff to Matt and Brian. You can go out, check it out. Everything that I showed you there, I paid nothing for the licensing other than Visual Studio, you know. But you can download Maya, open it up, take a look at what we've done. So I can hand that out to you guys.